Then we're going to get into the idea of intelligent design. And then, because it's not going to be a long lesson, I'll have 10 or 15 minutes to throw a fit like a child, and we'll go home. Okay, so we are going to start out by looking at the giraffe. The giraffe is an African mammal, and it is the tallest land animal. God designed the giraffe with some very special hardware. Let's look inside the giraffe. The giraffe is 18 feet tall. He has to pump blood up 9 feet to his head. Because of this, he has a heart that is 2.5 feet long. It is the largest heart of any land animal. It is a big, powerful pump to send that blood up 9 feet against gravity to his brain. So that big pump of a heart squeezes, and it sends the blood up his neck to his brain. Great. Real quick, does anyone know how, this has nothing to do with the video, I'm just eating up time here. Does anyone know how many bones a giraffe has in his neck? Very good, 7. Anyone other than Jessica, tell me, how many bones do you have in your neck? Mac? Moses? Nope. Amber? Nope. Jess? 7, just like the giraffe. Okay, so the giraffe has this big pump. He pumps blood up his neck 9 feet against gravity to his brain. Great. But what happens when the giraffe decides to bend down and drink some water? Well, all of a sudden, he bends down, and now his heart is about 9 feet above his head. So when his big, massive heart pumps blood down to his brain, it does it with the assistance of gravity, and the blood hits his brain so hard and with so much force that it blows his brains right out of his ears, and he dies. So now he's dying, and he's thinking to himself, I need to evolve something to take care of this problem. Because when I bend over and bow my head to get a drink of water, I blow my brains out. And as we know, dead creatures cannot evolve. So God made the giraffe with a special adaptation. The giraffe has a special kind of sponge at the base of his brain. Now, we're using the term sponge loosely. We're not going to get into valves and capillaries and go over how it works because we have children here. When he bends over to get a drink of water, his heart pumps and the blood gets shot down his neck to his brain. And what happens is the blood is absorbed by this sponge at the base of his brain so it doesn't hit his brain with the force and literally give the giraffe brain damage. So he's able to bow down and drink some water and not kill himself. Amazing. You don't have that sponge. You don't need it. Then, all of a sudden, the giraffe hears a lion roar. And the giraffe thinks, well, I don't want to be lunch, so he jumps up and he starts running. Problem is, the giraffe is only able to run about 5 feet, and he falls over because he got lightheaded because all the blood rushed back down into his heart, and he falls over. And as he's passed out and the lion begins to eat him, the giraffe starts to think, I need to evolve something that will fix this problem, because when I get up too fast, I pass out. Well, when the giraffe quickly picks up his head, what happens is that the sponge at the base of his brain releases the blood into his brain, and that allows him to continue on as normal until his heart is able to pump and get the blood back up to his brain and circulating as he needs. So the giraffe can have his head down drinking some water, he can jump up and start running full speed, and he never gets lightheaded and passes out. Now, I believe that if you think the giraffe evolved slowly due to numerous small modifications over millions of years, I think that is absurd. I think during that process, the giraffe would have died out. He needed to be created the way he is in order to survive. Now we're going to look at one more animal. That animal is the emperor penguin. The emperor penguin not only defies the theory of evolution, but he defies all logic. The penguins are going to undergo an amazing task. They are going to lay eggs and hatch eggs in the most forbidding climate on Earth. They go down to the Antarctic Peninsula to have their babies. Sometime during April and May, the penguins go further south to the colder parts of the Antarctic. Now remember, the South Pole is in the southern hemisphere, so April and May, that's not spring leading into summer, that's fall leading into winter. And when they are going into winter, they go further south to the South Pole to where it's colder, and that is where they have their babies. So these penguins will travel sometimes 60 to 100 miles inland. The female lays an egg and puts that egg on the male's feet. The male has what's called an egg pouch that goes around the egg and keeps the egg nice and warm. So he holds that egg on his feet and he covers it with what I'm going to call fur. I've never looked up what the name of it is, but so and he keeps that egg 95 degrees for almost 3 months. During this time, the temperature in the Antarctic can get colder than negative 100 degrees Fahrenheit. At this point, or I should I'm getting ahead of myself by one slide. An egg of a penguin exposed to those cold elements, left out on the snow, would freeze solid in under 2 minutes. At this point, the female leaves the papa penguin and she goes off to feed in the ocean for somewhere between 2 to 3 months. For these 2 months, the papa penguin does not eat or drink. He only keeps that egg warm. He will oftentimes lose up to 40% of his body weight while keeping the egg warm. God designed the papa penguin with special feet that can stand on ice in the coldest part of the world for months at a time. To keep from freezing, the papa penguin will huddle together in large flocks. They'll position themselves with their backs to the wind, and when the penguins on the outside get cold, they will nestle into the middle, and the guys in the middle that are warm will rotate out to the outside and take their turn up against the colder elements. And they'll continue to do this and rotate in and out to stay warm and keep these eggs warm, as I said, for months. Then, at some unknown, there's an unknown signal. I don't even know if there is. But somehow the mama penguin all of a sudden knows, I got to get back. So she swims back to where the papa penguin is because she knows that her chick is about to hatch. Then the mama penguin has to find the papa penguin when there are literally thousands and thousands and thousands of these guys waiting with eggs. And I don't know about you, but I can't tell the difference. Okay, they all look the same to me. Okay, I don't care how that sounds. They all look the same. So, now, more often than not, the mama penguin shows up on the very day the baby penguin hatches from its egg. She has to swim to shore. She has to walk sometimes 60 to 100 miles over snow and ice, and then find the papa penguin amongst thousands of other papa penguins with one egg. She has brought back with her partially digested food that she feeds to the baby penguin. This is fish from the ocean. She carries them with her in her stomach. Scientists don't understand how she's able to do this. The food does not rot, and it is not digested by her stomach. The food is preserved in a form that is to be food for the newborn baby chick. Some scientists believe that there might be some kind of an antibiotic manufactured by the mama penguin to preserve the food, but the fact is, we have no idea how this is done. Now, to believe that the emperor penguin evolved slowly due to numerous small modifications over millions of years, I think is absurd. During the trial and error phase of evolution, they would have all frozen or starved to death. I believe God made them, and he made them special, and he made them in a way where when we look at them, we have trouble believing that this could have possibly evolved. And keep in mind, evolution is not an intelligent, creative force. Evolution is randomness. That's all it has ever been claimed to be. I would love to hear an evolutionist say that it is an intelligent, creative force, because then they're admitting it's a religion. They believe that these things came about by randomness and chance. And I think that is absurd. Okay, now let's move into intelligent design. Here is a painting of George Washington crossing the Delaware River to fight the Hessian troops in Trenton, New Jersey. Very famous painting. Here's my question. Did this painting evolve, or was it created? Now, I'm serious. I want an answer from an adult. Did it evolve, or was it created? Created. Okay. Seems to be a consensus. How do you know it was created? It has form. Anyone else? Has organization. Anyone else? There's probably a signature somewhere. I like that better than all the other answers. So here's my question. Are you saying that you can tell just by looking that it was created? You see, if you're an evolutionist, you feel uncomfortable answering that. Do you know that every dyed-in-the-wool evolutionist would agree with you that this painting had a painter? None of them would argue that. Now let's see where the fork in the road lies. I'm going to put a picture up on the screen, and I want you to holler out, created or evolved. Okay? Number one, the human eye. Okay, we don't have many evolutionists here. Okay, what about the camera? Okay, created. Okay, what about the human ear. Okay, still all created. Okay, what about the microphone? Okay, well, I'm sorry to say, but all of you got that wrong. The ear and the eye did not evolve. The hearing ear and the seeing eye, the Lord hath made, even both of them. Proverbs 20, verse 12. The whole idea of intelligent design requires that we can identify something that has been designed. The definition of design is deliberate planning with purpose. So the question we have to start with is, can people recognize design when it is in front of them? And the answer is, of course they can. If not, how do you explain the entire field of anthropology? You're digging through the dirt. How do you determine whether the things you find are man-made or a natural anomaly? Here we have 6,000 life-size pottery men and horses that cover over 500 acres in the Spirit City found in China. Well, were they created, or is that a natural anomaly? Everybody would agree. Someone made those things. Here is the world's largest rock group. It would be ridiculous for any of us to insist that this mountain formed by natural processes. I've been there. I've actually climbed Mount Rushmore. Now, you don't climb up the faces, you climb up the back, but it's in a mountain range and there's a lot of climbing in the area. Now, I believe it is equally absurd to think that the human eye came about by natural processes. So let's look at identifying order and design. Here we have a random letter sequence. You can get this by just mashing your hand into a keyboard. You get random letters. Here, again, are letters, but this time they are arranged in an order. Finally, this is specified complexity. We take the letters, we arrange them in a specific order with spaces and punctuation to make a sentence. We can read these words and we convey a message. Now, evolutionists are prepared to use specified complexity as proof of intelligence when it suits their ideology, but only then. The SETI program would be pointless if there were no way of determining whether a certain type of signal from outer space would be proof of an intelligent sender. SETI stands for Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, and during the early 90s, it was something that NASA was throwing a lot of money at, and what was happening was we were basically scanning the skies and seeing if we could find a signal that had been sent from extraterrestrial intelligence, an intelligent life form outside of planet Earth. Now, the whole idea of this program would be ridiculous if we couldn't find a signal and determine that it had a creator, as opposed to random noise from naturalistic processes. See, the evolutionists have no problem saying that, yes, we can identify something that is unknown and determine whether it had a creator or is naturalistic, but they'll only say that when it fits their ideology. When you talk about biology, all of a sudden they say, no, it all evolved. It was naturalistic processes, no creative intelligence, no force behind it whatsoever, clearly evolution. I don't know if I want to get off book here. Let's stay with it for one more minute. Here is a book called A Million Random Digits. Anyone own this? Guess what it contains? Each page, yeah, now you answer. Each page has 10 columns. Each column contains 50 lines, broken up into groups of 5. There are 400 pages. There are 2,500 digits on each page, which total a million random digits. Now, this is a real book. It was published in 1955 by the RAND Corporation. It was produced with an electronic simulation of a roulette wheel and a computer. It was an important work in the field of statistics and random numbers. This wasn't a joke. This was made on purpose. The RAND Corporation had access to the most powerful computers of the day. And the authors had to make sure that these numbers had no symmetry, no predictability, and no patterning of any sort. See, even today, one of the most difficult things to get a computer to do is to provide a truly arbitrary number. Any procedure used to create random numbers isn't truly random. You see, it may look like a random list, but some pattern or some formula was used to create them. Someone had to program the computer to do this. So completely random numbers are actually valuable for experiments in certain fields of study. So the RAND Corporation's book was, believe it or not, a serious tool for serious scientists at the time. The reason this is here for us today is to show us that the defining characteristic of a collection of random numbers is the total absence of design. So we live in a culture today that attributes design to randomness. It's astonishing to realize that we live in a culture that has ruled out the concept of design and gives randomness credit for every finely tuned machine found in nature. The human eye may be the product of millions of years of evolution. It's in a textbook that I have on my shelf at home. That is what children are being taught in school. A more accurate statement would be the human eye is infinitely more complex than the most advanced camera on Earth, and it can heal itself. I've never seen a camera able to do that. We're going to look at the human eye real quick, going to go through how it works, and we're going to see how frustrated I get with this wireless mouse. There we go. So this is the human eye. I'm going to try to explain how it works briefly, just so we understand. Now, anyone that has experience with cameras will see how the human eye, the lens, the retina being the film, the shutter, the aperture, you can see how it all works together. The camera was designed based on the human eye. I don't know if it was done that way on purpose, but you can see the similarities. So light enters in through the eye, through the cornea, which is a tough layer of transparent cells. Then the light passes through a small chamber called the anterior chamber. This chamber is filled with a liquid called aqueous humor. The iris is the colored part of your eye, and it has a small opening called the pupil. The pupil is the black part of the eye, and muscles in the iris cause it to open and close and make the pupil larger and smaller to regulate the amount of light that comes through the eye. Behind the iris is the lens, and the lens also has small muscles in it that help focus the light. it adjusts the lens to focus your eye. The lens focuses the light onto what is called the retina. The retina is on the back of your eyeball, and what happens is the image actually hits the retina upside down and backwards. Now, photoreceptors on the retina convert light into a nerve impulse. The retina is like the film in a camera. The retina is thinner than a sheet of plastic wrap, yet more sensitive to light than any man-made film. The best man-made film can handle a ratio of 1,000 to 1 in terms of photons of light sensitivity. By comparison, human retinal cells can handle a ratio of 10 billion to 1 photons. That is 10 million times better than the best man-made film on Earth. The retina of your eye is less than 1 square inch, yet it contains over 137 million light-sensitive cells. I don't know if we have any electrical engineers here, but I would love to see someone try to wire up 137 million connections in less than 1 square inch. If you look, or I'm sorry, let's move on to the next cell here. So these photoreceptor cells have a very high rate of metabolism and must be completely replaced every 7 days. These are your rods and cones. If you look at a very bright spot of light, you look at the sun or someone shines a flashlight in your eyes, a lot of times these will burn out and you will have a blind spot that's kind of bright or whitish and you can't see anything. The rods and cones, as they get replaced, you receive your vision again. That's how fast they get replaced after burning out. So the light hits the retina and it is converted into a nerve impulse and it is taken to the brain by the optic nerve. Now the brain interprets them, the nerve impulses, as visual images and provides information about the external world. Now remember, none of this works unless there is a central computer that receives all this information from the camera. We read, infinitely more complex than any machine ever invented, the brain is the essence of what makes us human. That is a quote from a National Geographic article. My question is a simple one. If the brain is infinitely more complex than any machine ever made, doesn't it stand to reason that the brain, was designed as well as the most complex machine ever made? This is the point I was trying to make before. We live in a culture that has ruled out design as a possibility, and instead we call randomness the creative force, and we give it credit for finely tuned machines. Remember that the next time an evolutionist tries to talk down to you. They're the one that believes that randomness is the creative force. To suppose that the eye could have evolved, to suppose that the eye could have been formed by natural selection seems, I freely confess, absurd in the highest degree. That was Charles Darwin, written in his book, The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or the Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. So there you have it. Patrick Hayes agrees with Charles Darwin. You can use that soundbite against me whenever you like. We read in Psalm 139, verse 14, I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. God did not say you are incredibly evolved. Remember, the first role that Jesus took on was that of the Creator. For by him were all things created, that are in heaven and that are in earth, visible and invisible, whether they be thrones or dominions or principalities or powers, all things were created by him and for him. Colossians 1:16. Jesus is also directly called the Creator in John chapter 1 and also in 1 Corinthians chapter 8. It is not okay for us to give honor and glory to randomness as the creative force. That is the breaking of the first three of the 10 commandments. We are taking something that God deserves the credit for, and we are worshiping randomness and chaos and attributing creative forces to it. And that was the first thing that Jesus ever did. Jesus was the creator. It is said over and over and over again in the Bible. Do you know that every Saturday, Jews all around the world take the day off? They keep the Sabbath day in remembrance of God as the creator. And we write it off as no big deal. Christians that believe that we came from monkeys, that we evolved. You are robbing God of his most amazing feat, the creation of the entire universe. We say, nope, that came from randomness. It's as ridiculous as thinking you can get yourself to heaven. Nope, Jesus didn't need to die on the cross. I'm a good enough person. I deserve to go to heaven. You are a fool. I read an article that compared the human eye to a camera. It was trying to figure out how much a camera would cost if it were able to do what the human eye could do. So it went over all the different things that cameras need. It went over the lens, it went over the megapixels, it went over the aperture, and it went over things that, I'm not a camera guy. I don't know what cameras do, okay? But I was reading this article and I went through it all. I didn't write it down because I didn't want to take too much time in it. And it said, okay, so the eyeball is capable of doing this. Let's find a camera that can do the equivalent. And they said, okay, a camera of that sort would cost this much money for this feature. And then they went down to the next one. They said, okay, well, an eyeball is able to do this. Well, there's no camera even close to being able to do that, but the best camera in the world that's able to do something comparative is this, and how much that costs. So they came and they boiled it all down. They were just having fun in the article, and they said, okay, how much would it cost to buy a camera that could do what your eyeball does? Who has a guess? Levi. 2 million. Higher. I don't want to hear from either of you kids. You might have heard the answer already. Anyone else? What's your guess? Come on.
5 trillion.
5 trillion. He is not going to win at The Price is Right. Amber. 4.6 billion. Man, this is getting worse by the minute. Okay, I'm just going to tell you because $35 million. It would cost over $35 million to make a camera that could do what your eyeball does. And just think, you've got 2 of them. That's for one. Yep, you've got a pair. Now, it was just a neat thing that it went through when comparing the eyeball, which, as the evolutionists say, came about by randomness and chance, and the camera, where they are constantly trying to figure out ways to make a better and better camera, to see further into space, to look at smaller and smaller things with greater and greater detail. And anyway, they're nowhere close is the answer anytime you compare the two. Okay, now we're going to change gears a little bit. We're going to look at the complexity of very, very small, microscopic machines. And we're going to see how they could not have evolved. Again, Charles Darwin said, if it could be demonstrated, that any complex organ existed which could not possibly have been formed by numerous successive slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down. Now remember, everything in evolution was a little change. Little change and a little change and a little change and a little change and a little change. The problem you find is, what about the eyeball? Because you take away certain parts and all of a sudden you can't see. Okay, without an optic nerve, I don't care how well the retina and the lens and all the other parts work, you ain't gonna see. Okay, there are certain parts that you can't take away. You don't have vision anymore. So how did that evolve slowly? Now we're gonna kind of get away from the eyeball because I want to show you one neat little idea. But in order to do this, I want to go over this idea with the theory of irreducible complexity. Now, we have gone over this before, so we're only going to cover it briefly tonight, but I think it bears repeating, and it's a neat idea. I'm assuming we are all familiar with the mousetrap. Everyone's seen one of these, used one of these, possibly yelled really loud and screamed and jumped up and down because of one of these. Okay. The mousetrap is made up of 5 basic parts. You have the trigger, the holding bar, the wood baseboard, the hammer, and the spring. Now, all the components are necessary for the function of the system. And the question I have is there any part you can remove and still have the system function? Out of those 5 parts, can you take away any one of them and still have the machine catch mice? The answer is no. That's the idea behind irreducible complexity. You can't reduce the system by one step. You can't take away any part. It won't work anymore. Number 2, all the components need to perform at a level suitable for its purpose. The spring needs to be strong enough. You cannot replace the wood baseboard with a 3x5 index card. It's not rigid enough. It wouldn't hold all the parts together, you understand? So not only do you have to have all the parts, they all have to work at a level suitable for the system to function. And finally, all the components need to be assembled appropriately to perform the task. All the pieces have to be in the right place. You can't have the hammer and the trigger on different sides of the wood board. It won't work. You can't turn pieces sideways. You need these 3 points are required for irreducibly complex machines. The mousetrap is an example of an irreducibly complex machine. The eyeball is another one. Okay, you take away any of the parts, you don't have vision. Now, I understand you can remove certain parts and you can't see, but you could still make out blurry images in front of you, and it would be more like a photo receptor. It could sense light and darkness, but it can't see a visual image. And we're not going to debate all the finer parts. The evolutionists, for some reason, constantly miss the forest for all the trees. They seem to purposely ignore the point you're trying to make. Which gets us off into the weeds. So the irreducibly complex machine means you can't take away one part and still have it work. Okay. So here we go. We cannot take away a single part of this machine and have it still work, and that applies to several biological systems. Now, if you want to read more about this idea, the theory of irreducible complexity was introduced by a professor named Michael Behe. He wrote this book. It's called Darwin's Black Box. He is a professor of biochemistry at Lehigh University. That is not a Christian college. Okay, he's not a creationist by any means. But he still puts up the argument, I don't know what you guys want me to say, evolution could not have worked the way it is explained. It does not work. And he's not saying that God created everything. He's just saying we have to stop teaching the theory of evolution the way we're teaching it, because it's nonsense. It doesn't work. It never has, it never will, it's impossible. So let's stop and figure out how it did work. Anyway, it's a great book. Okay. Let's read Psalm 139, verse 14. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. So God is saying that his creation proves the existence of a creator. And that, I mean, it only makes sense. It's like the painting. The painting proves there was a painter. Now, this is a picture of a bacterial flagellum. There it is. It is a propeller that allows the bacteria to move through its environment. Has anyone seen a picture of this before? Okay. This is a complex motor by any standard. Let's see if this works. This is the first time I put one of these in the slideshow. Here we go. There are more than 40 protein parts that are necessary for the machine to work. If any are missing, you get a flagellum that doesn't work. This can rotate at speeds up to 100,000 RPMs. Then it can stop and in a quarter turn come to a stop and go and rotate in the opposite direction at 100,000 RPM. Now, as things get smaller, the fluid they move through feels thicker to them. So a bacteria swimming through water is like a person swimming through peanut butter, roughly at 60 miles per hour. The bacteria swimming through its environment would be the equivalent of a human being swimming through peanut butter at about 60 miles an hour. Okay, another way of saying it, because I see some blank looks. You ever see a cat standing on the floor and jump up to the top of a refrigerator? Okay, that would be like a human being being able to jump up on top of their house. Can we do that? No. The cat can jump way better than we can. The single-celled bacteria can swim way better than Michael Phelps. We get it? Okay. Now all the kids are like, who's Michael Phelps? Don't worry. Don't worry. Okay, let's see. Where am I? Here we are. This motor is so tiny that 8 million of them would fit in the cross-section of the average human hair. The bacteria flagellum is more complicated and more efficient than this motor, and they have all the same parts. But for some reason, the evolutionists say, oh yeah, clearly this electric motor, there was a creator, there was a designer, there's probably a team of designers. But when it comes to making a microorganism that has a motor that's far superior to this, they laugh and say, ha ha ha, that evolved over millions of years by blind random chance. You silly creationist. This is a Boeing 747. It is made from 4.5 million parts that don't fly. We all agree it was created. This bacteria is a single cell that is made up of billions of parts. Every individual part is non-living. When the evolutionist studies this, they continue to wonder, how could this have evolved? Because it looks like it was designed by an intelligent creator. Well, to help crush those thoughts is Francis Crick, a Nobel Prize winner for the field of physiology and medicine. He said, biologists must constantly keep in mind that what they see was not designed, but evolved. You see, the thought is going to come up continually that what you are studying must have been created. You need to suppress that thought and remind yourself with this mantra: It evolved, it evolved, it evolved. Is that not what he's saying? That's exactly what he's saying. When you study the field of biology, you will naturally come to the conclusion that it must have been designed by intelligent, creative forces, and you must suppress that idea and constantly remind yourself that what you see was not designed, but evolved. This here is a Samsung Galaxy S9. It is the phone that I keep in my pocket. It has a 12 megapixel camera, 4K video recording, a 64-bit processor, 64 gig memory. It's Wi-Fi and Bluetooth capable. It stores thousands of pictures and songs. It has a calculator, datebook, voicemail, invoicing program, accounting software, and a Bible. I can access bank accounts, investment banking, movie streaming, and video games. I have a map of the entire world and access to every book ever written. Now, to call this a phone is like calling the new Mercedes GT convertible a cup holder. Yes, it can hold your cup. Okay, but it does way more than that. This is not a phone. This is a computer, a handheld computer that happens to have a phone app. And this computer is faster and superior in every way to the computers I had when I went to college. Do you know that I never met the guy who made this phone? I don't need to meet him to know this phone had a designer. This phone had a creator. He was probably Chinese. In the same way, all around us, the creation testifies of a creator. And even if you don't know him today, one day you are going to meet him. I like to finish every lesson with the same question. If you were to die today, are you 100% sure that you would go to heaven when you died? There is no right or wrong answer to this question. There's only an honest one. And I ask, if you are not sure, please let me take the Bible and show you. It'll only take a few minutes of your time, and you can know for sure. The Bible says you don't have to wonder, you don't have to hope. It says you can know that heaven is your home. For whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. With that being said, we're done for the evening. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Patrick Hayes. I always ask that you please follow us on facebook.com/Bible Study on the Farm, and you can contact me. My email is BibleStudyOnTheFarm@gmail.com. I'd love to answer any questions you might have about the Bible or be a help in any way that I possibly can. With that being said, let's bow our heads for a word of prayer, and we'll be dismissed. God in heaven, thank you so much again for just bringing us all together to be able to study the Bible. God, we do love you. I hope that you know that.